At exactly 6:14 in the morning, retired Army veteran Daniel Harper opened his front door and found a bright red notice taped across it that read, "Final warning, property lien pending." Daniel stood there in silence, staring at the paper while his coffee slowly spilled onto the porch. He had lived in the small Arizona neighborhood for almost 11 years and had never missed a single HOA payment. He kept his lawn trimmed, his driveway spotless, and barely even spoke to most neighbors. But somehow, according to the notice, he now owed the HOA $18,740 in violations and legal fees. And if he didn't pay within 14 days, they were threatening to begin foreclosure proceedings on his house. What Daniel didn't know yet was that the woman behind everything had been targeting him for nearly 8 months. And by the time the entire neighborhood discovered what HOA President Cynthia Keller had really been doing, police detectives would be carrying boxes of HOA records out of the community office, while local news cameras filmed everything from the street. The nightmare had started over something unbelievably small. 3 months earlier, Daniel's daughter Emily had temporarily moved into his home after going through a divorce. She worked night shifts as an ER nurse and usually came home around 2 or 3 in the morning. One evening, Emily parked her blue pickup truck in the driveway instead of inside the garage because Daniel's garage door motor had broken. The next morning, Daniel received a violation notice stating that commercial-style vehicles were prohibited from being visible overnight. The truck wasn't commercial at all. It was a standard Ford pickup with no logos or equipment. Half the neighborhood owned similar trucks. Daniel ignored the warning at first because he assumed it was a mistake. 2 days later, another violation arrived. Then another. Then another. Every single one carried additional late fees. Soon, the fines jumped from $50 to $200 per notice. Daniel tried contacting the HOA office multiple times, but received no response. Finally, he attended a monthly board meeting, hoping to resolve everything peacefully. That was the first time he met Cynthia Keller face to face. Cynthia was in her late 50s and treated the HOA like her personal kingdom. She constantly drove around the neighborhood in a golf cart searching for violations. She photographed trash cans, lawns, holiday decorations, and even measured fence heights with a tape measure. Most residents hated her, but avoided confrontation because she had been HOA president for almost 7 years. At the meeting, Daniel calmly explained that the truck belonged to his daughter and asked why similar vehicles throughout the neighborhood weren't receiving violations. Cynthia immediately became defensive. She told Daniel that rules applied differently depending on repeated non-compliance patterns. Nobody even understood what that meant. When Daniel asked her to clarify, Cynthia snapped and accused him of challenging board authority. Several neighbors watched uncomfortably as she continued speaking over him. Then she made a huge mistake. In front of everyone, Cynthia announced that she had personally instructed the HOA compliance team to watch Daniel's property more closely. The room went silent. Even other board members looked surprised. Daniel left the meeting frustrated, but still believed things would calm down eventually. Instead, the harassment escalated. Over the next several weeks, violations began appearing for absurd reasons. One notice claimed Daniel's American flag was hanging 2 inches lower than community standards. Another claimed his grass color looked uneven. Another violation cited improper trash can timing because his trash bin had remained outside for 40 extra minutes after pickup. Then the fines started multiplying. Every notice included administrative charges, processing fees, and attorney fees. By the end of 2 months, the total somehow exceeded $12,000. Daniel hired a local attorney named Mark Benson, who immediately suspected something was wrong. When Mark requested documentation proving the violations had been approved properly, the HOA delayed for weeks. Then they sent heavily incomplete records. Dates were missing, signatures were inconsistent. Some violation photographs didn't even match Daniel's property. One image used as evidence showed an entirely different house number. Mark realized somebody inside the HOA office was either extremely incompetent or deliberately fabricating records. Meanwhile, Cynthia became even more aggressive. She began walking near Daniel's property almost daily. Neighbors noticed her stopping outside his house, taking pictures with her phone for long periods of time. One afternoon, Emily confronted her directly after spotting Cynthia photographing the backyard through a side gate. Cynthia immediately threatened Emily with trespassing complaints and claimed the HOA had broad inspection authority. Emily recorded the entire confrontation on her phone. The video spread through the neighborhood Facebook group within hours. Residents were furious. Dozens of homeowners began sharing their own experiences with Cynthia. One elderly couple claimed they were fined because their bird feeder was visually disruptive. Another resident received violations after refusing to support Cynthia during HOA elections. A single mother had been threatened with legal action over chalk drawings her children made on the sidewalk. People slowly realized the HOA wasn't enforcing rules equally. Cynthia was selectively targeting residents she personally disliked. But things became truly serious when a former HOA bookkeeping assistant named Rachel contacted Daniel privately. Rachel had quit 6 months earlier after repeated arguments with Cynthia over financial records. During a meeting at a coffee shop, Rachel revealed something shocking. According to her, Cynthia regularly ordered employees to alter dates on violation notices so extra late fees could accumulate faster. She also claimed the HOA attorney was close friends with Cynthia and approved nearly everything without review. Rachel still had copies of internal emails she saved before resigning. One email included direct instructions from Cynthia telling staff to continue pressure until compliance is achieved financially. Another referred to Daniel specifically as the veteran who thinks rules don't apply to him. Mark Benson immediately realized they finally had evidence strong enough for court. He filed an emergency motion to stop the foreclosure threat while demanding full HOA financial records through discovery. That's when Cynthia completely lost control. Instead of backing down, she sent another violation notice accusing Daniel of hostile behavior toward board members. The violation referenced Emily's recorded confrontation video. Unfortunately for Cynthia, that notice became the final piece of evidence the judge needed to see a clear pattern of retaliation. Within days, the court ordered the HOA to release years of financial and enforcement records, and what investigators discovered was catastrophic. Hundreds of violations across the neighborhood had been manipulated. Certain residents received dramatically higher fines than others for identical issues. Late fees had been added illegally. HOA funds were being used for personal expenses, including expensive restaurant bills, hotel stays, and even luxury shopping purchases connected to Cynthia's credit card reimbursements. The community erupted. Neighbors packed the next HOA meeting so heavily that people stood outside the building listening through open windows. Cynthia attempted to defend herself by blaming bookkeeping errors and miscommunication. Nobody believed her anymore. Then one homeowner stood up and asked why Cynthia's own house had 20 visible violations with 0 fines issued against her property. The room exploded with shouting. Another resident projected financial spreadsheets onto a screen showing thousands of dollars in suspicious expenses. Several board members immediately resigned during the meeting itself. Someone in the crowd shouted that police were outside, and they actually were. 2 detectives entered the building and quietly spoke with Cynthia before walking her outside while cameras from a local news station filmed everything from the street. By the following week, the county launched a full investigation into HOA financial misconduct. The HOA attorney resigned. Multiple lawsuits followed. Eventually, Cynthia faced charges related to fraud, falsifying records, and misuse of HOA funds. But for Daniel, the damage had already taken a personal toll. Months of stress had nearly destroyed his peace of mind. Emily blamed herself for moving in and unintentionally triggering the entire situation. Still, Daniel refused to leave the neighborhood. Instead, he attended every HOA restructuring meeting afterward. Several honest homeowners encouraged him to run for the board. At first, he refused. Then one elderly resident told him something that changed his mind completely. She said, "Good people staying silent is exactly how people like Cynthia take over." 3 months later, Daniel won a seat on the new HOA board by the largest vote margin in neighborhood history. The new board erased thousands of fraudulent fines across the community and introduced transparency rules requiring every violation to be reviewed publicly. As for Cynthia, neighbors later heard she quietly sold her house after multiple civil lawsuits drained her finances. Ironically, before moving out, she received an official violation notice herself. Her lawn had become severely overgrown.